The Nuts and Bolts of Writing, Season 2, a podcast where we talk about literature, the ins and outs of writing, and how to actually start writing. Hi, everyone. Today, we have a guest, Tejaswinee Roychowdhury, who was one of our contributors to issue 3 of our literary zine, The Unconventional Courier. She submitted the thought-provoking short story, Where Does the River Go?, which is linked below. Tejaswinee is a writer, poet, and artist from West Bengal, India. Her fiction and poetry have been nominated for the Pushcart Prize 2013. Her work has been or is scheduled to be widely published, such as in Dreich Magazine, Muse India, Paddler Press, Amity, Hawakal 2022, The Unconventional Courier, Roi Fainéant, Taco Bell Quarterly, Kitaab, and more. She is also the founder of the Hooghly Review. Tejaswinee is also a lawyer and can be found tweeting at Tejaswinee RC on Twitter. Hi, Tejaswinee. Thank you for coming on. How are you?
Hi, Imelda. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being our first, the Unconventional Courier guest. You are the first writer who is from our zine that we are interviewing on this podcast. So it is very exciting.
That's exciting for me too. I did not know this.
So, first question. What were you inspired by when you wrote your story for The Unconventional Courier? Where Does the River Go?
Well, the thing is, when I wrote the story, I saw this submission call from this magazine, Puerto del Sol, right? And they had a special feature issue, and it was titled Water, like the theme had to be water. And I think in the story, I used this I think, I don't remember exactly what I wrote, but I used this idea that life is like a river and you have to let it flow like the river. And this is something which I believe in. So while that theme did prompt me to start thinking about a story on the theme of water and the flow of life, the way I see it, I wrote that story, and while it got rejected there, and when a story does get rejected, you get to, like, it got rejected after 8 months, right? So after 8 months, when I looked at the story again, I was like, okay, I can make a few more edits here, and so I did that, and I sent it to 2 magazines actually, but you guys responded within 12 hours, and I was like, okay, this is it. So yeah, and I think it's also driven by the idea of fate in general, because not just the flow of life, like water, like a river. I mean, also the idea of fate, because I think I've come to believe in this. Like, I used to be very skeptical about a lot of things, but as life goes by, I think you kind of ease up to the idea that, you know what, I don't need to be so skeptical about every single thing. And I think I've come to believe in fate in a way, that it's okay, it's fine, and I think fate is, which is why it's one of the driving forces in the story, like, as far as I would look at it.
Yeah, definitely. Because, what happens at the end of the story, no one really expected it, but in a way it had to happen, didn't it? Unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. So, number 2, what books and themes inspired you the most as a writer?
This is such a wide question, if I'm being honest. Like, even when you were asking me over email, I told you that, it's very difficult to pick something out, because okay, first things first, I think the first book which I read, which led me to believe that, one day I can write and one day I will write, is when I read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone for the first time. When I read that, I was like, you know what? I think I was some 9 or 10 years old back then. And so I thought that, you know, I can write something like from the very first page. I thought I can, write someday. But the idea of stories has always, like, my mom got me into stories. And even like the other day, I had posted an author interview with my mom where I was requested to do that. So even then, like, I was just recalling in that interview the way my mom just got me into, like, it was never about literature or culture or all those things. It's just stories were a way of life. Like I'm refusing to eat. Okay, so if I keep narrating the other day's Roadrunner show or Tom and Jerry show, like the episode that I saw, if I narrate that, then I'll focus on narrating instead of eating, and I'll also eat. Right. So my mom just got me into stories in that manner. And if I had to pinpoint my love for stories, I think the focal point would be her, because I don't think I can really pinpoint anything else. But growing up, I was influenced by a lot of writers, a lot of writers. For instance, I think one of the first poems that, when I first read this poem, I think I was in our educational system, we call it class 7, the 7th standard. So I think I was about 12 years old back then. So there was this poem by Robert Frost, right? And oh gosh, right now I'm forgetting the name of the poem, but it was right. The Road Not Taken. I got it. The Road Not Taken, and that was the first poem that influenced me as a person. And the reason I'm going into this, and I've read a bunch of poems like that, like The Inchcape Rock by Robert Southey, I believe. And then there were a few stories and novels which we had to read back in school. And they were by, for instance, Rabindranath Tagore or Abanindranath Tagore. And then there were Sarachandra Chattopadhyay. Like, I'm talking about the regional Bengali writers as well. So, yeah, a lot of writers did influence me as a person growing up. And I think that's important because when we write, I think what I do, I cannot speak for other writers, but what I do is I pour myself into the writing. So everything I have ever read has stayed with me. And yeah, and I think some of the more impactful stories that had led me to directly be like, I'm going to maybe go there. Like, for example, I think I told you the other day, there's a story called Love Across the Salt Desert by Keki and Daruwala. And this story, it's one of my favorite short stories, right? Because it's about love, like, love transcends all boundaries. And I really believe in love, like, not just romantic love. I believe in all kinds of love. So, and when I read that story, it's set in the run of Kutch, and so in India Pakistan border area. So when I read that story, I really wanted to visit the run of Kutch. Like, I did not think about stories or anything. I wanted to visit there, and when I did visit there, and the stuff that I heard from the local people there about how the moon shines on the salt desert and everything, that gave birth to a story. So, yeah, I think we are influenced by everything we read, whether it's a newspaper article or whether it's a poem or a novel or anything like that. Or I also talked about my novel with you. That's The Book of Fate, one of my favorite novels. The Book of Fate by Parinosh Saini, and it was translated to, like, it's an Iranian novel, and it's actually quite like it talks about the history of Iran, the transition period, which led to the Islamic Revolution, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so I while I also learned a lot from that novel, like things you don't know, right, from a very personal perspective, and also, well, it's called The Book of Fate, and my story, like, I think I am driven by fate in a lot of things that I write, not just the story I wrote for you guys. I have done this in other stories as well. So yeah, I mean, you get influenced by everything, even if it's a tweet. I mean, one of my short stories was actually influenced by a picture that I saw on Twitter. It was of a jacaranda tree. So I saw that picture and I thought, okay, a story came out of it. So yeah, I think you let everything around you influence you. as a writer. You're always writing as if it's a 24/7 job.
Yes, I agree. I think, a lot of things can influence me too. And I think, being a writer just means kind of delving into your thoughtscape, which, was influenced by all
Yeah.
your experiences and the people around you and all the other stuff you've read. So that makes a lot of sense. And, I feel the same way as well. Number 3, you're a lawyer and I am too. Has your legal practice and studies influenced your approach to writing? If so, how?
Well, in a way it did. Not in a way. I think studying law influenced me as a person, and that influenced my writing in turn. Because here's the thing, like growing up, and I never really planned on studying law. I wanted to study geography. And I wanted to be a traveler. And somehow I thought that, if I studied geography, I could travel around the world. It was a misplaced thought, but I thought that for a very long time. And so it did not work out. The geography line did not work out. And my mom actually pushed me into studying law. So like, go and study law. And so I thought, okay, fine, I'll study law then. And I think the reason she said it, and she later told me that there's a reason I asked you to study law, is that, in my home, like it's just me, my mom, and my dad. So thing is, my mom and dad, they fight a lot, right? And growing up, they were always fighting. So I think from the time that I can remember, what I was always doing is, you know what, enough is enough. You two sit down. You tell me what's wrong. You tell me what's wrong. Let's sort this out once and for all.
So you were a
And
mediator.
yeah, so I was doing this always, and no one taught me how to do this. I was always doing this. And my mom decided at some point that, you know what, it's best if you just go into law, because I think you might not have ended up finally solving our marital problems, but you will be able to help other people. And so I think, well, my mom influenced me to write stories. She influenced me to go into law, so she really has a lot of influence on me there. But yeah, I mean, when I started studying law, I think initially I didn't really get the subjects, because I remember I struggled with contract law. It was there in the first year. Family law was fine with me, but contract law was really like, so I went with the flow for a long time, because that was a time when I was not writing. I wrote till my school years, and then law school, five we had 5 years of law school, and then 2 more years of master's degree. So during that time I did not dive into the creative process at all. Instead, I think I just let myself evolve as a person, which at the time I didn't know what I was doing, but it eventually helped me, right? So I think I understood the importance of uh, fairness just in life. And I'm not talking about equality, I'm talking about fairness, because equality is certainly one aspect which is, I think the world focuses on it a lot. Equality, like everyone should be equal before the, like they talk about everyone should be equal, but when we lawyers talk about it, I think we talk about equality before the eyes of law. We talk about it a little differently, I think. Anyone who has studied law will do that. So I think a lot about uh, you know um, second chances and redemption. Like, this is not the end. Like, I think we live currently, because the the political, socio political atmosphere also affects us. So I think we are living in an increase, and I don't mean this to offend anyone, obviously, but also I feel like we are living in a very unforgiving time, where we just don't want to forgive anything, right? The littlest of the mistake can just set people off, and it's like, this is it, this is over. And I think about it a lot, because this is not how I perceived the world when I studied law. Like, this is not why I studied law, right? Because it cannot, like, we are human beings, we are going to make mistakes, we are going to be great flawed characters, and our stories, our characters are going to be gray characters. You better not hope for purely black and white characters, because that's just boring, right? And so yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, like redemption arc is a good character arc. And if I think about the way law has influenced my writing, like I first have to think about, like I said, the way it influenced me as a person. And so, yeah, I think about a lot of things. For example, another thing that really bugs me is right now, there's a lot of, let's just call it media investigation or whatever you want to call it, media, the way media operates. So a lot of the times what we see around us is that there is no audio alternate important. And you know what I'm talking about, like, excuse me, hear the other side. Doesn't matter what the statistics are saying or what you think it should be or what you have assumed it to be. Learn to hear the other side, learn to process it, and if and maybe just what, you might be wrong, learn to believe that what, I accept that I was wrong about this, I made the judgment call too fast, too soon, I came to a conclusion too soon. So yeah, these things do influence my writing, because at the end of the day, these are the things I believe in. Like, I believe in conflict resolution, I believe in hearing out the other side, I believe in that compassion, basic, like, I think these things are not just led by principles of law, but also compassion in general. And I try to bring that level of compassion in my writing, where, let's say, I can, like, not every plot, like if I'm writing a really really short, like, flash fiction or something, and maybe the plot doesn't call for it, but I think when the plot does call for it, I try to, not consciously, I don't even do it consciously, I think it's just a part of me that reflects in the writing. And to answer your question, I think that's how law has influenced me as a writer.
That makes sense. Yes. Because writing a lot of the times is basically looking at human psychology, right? So this is really important. And, I totally agree with you about the whole fairness thing, especially on social media. I think a lot of the times people are trapped in their own echo chambers, people with specific political views. They do not want to hear what the other side says, and they only follow or like posts by people who have the exact same views. And if they come across anyone who has a slightly different view, sometimes there's a lot of arguments and, a lot of drama.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The internet is Twitter is the place you go if you want to, have that drama in life.
Exactly. Okay, fourth question. What kind of stories do you plan to write in the future? Will you be publishing any books?
Well, I do plan to write stories, in the sense, look, I think I want to venture into a lot of sci-fi and horror, like, speculative fiction. Like, if I'm talking about just also, like, venturing into the commercial side of writing, and not just literary fiction. And I'm not saying that I'm making a difference here, because I do believe in character driven plots, and I always focus on my characters more. And I maybe, like, I need to learn a little more about plot development, and I try to, I always bother my mom about it, because she is been writing a lot more than me, and I'm like, tell me, how do you focus on plots and everything. But primarily I do focus on my characters, and I think when I can, fully, I know who the character is in my mind, then I can go somewhere with that character, I can move forward with the plot and everything. So even though I wish to sort of venture into this sci-fi and just basically speculative fiction as a whole, while keeping the literary element of character-driven stories, yeah, that's the, like, I think for the next phase of my writing, if I may call it, yeah, that's the route I want to go. And as for novels, I have a few ideas, but I am going back and forth on actually writing them at the moment, because I think I need to mature a bit more as a writer. I don't think I'm there yet, and you can, uh, you know, um, there's a right time to tell a story and there's a wrong time to tell a story. You should know whether you're ready to tell the story that you're trying to tell, right? So, because you also want to do justice to the story.
Very
So
true.
yeah, so I want to focus a lot more at the moment on short stories. Like, I think I have been keeping my stories traditionally under 2500 words, and I would like to go into 5000, 6000, that bracket. So yeah, and write engaging stories. And so yeah, like, I don't think I'm working on any novels anytime soon. But yeah, I
Yeah.
do have some ideas, and yeah, I'll work on them. Eventually, I'll work on them.
Yeah, definitely. Novels are really hard to write. I mostly focus on short stories too because they're easier to structure. And, also you don't have to have a continuous flow of
Ah,
inspiration for one specific group of characters, right? For short stories, you can always change the setting. Once you're done one story, you can move on to another theme you want to explore. But for a novel, you
mhm.
have to be dedicated to a specific theme
Oh
or set of
yes.
characters and write, thousands or tens of thousands of words about them.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and you have to be prepared that I might lose the plot at any time. This, like, 6 months of work, 1 year of work might go down the drain. And then of course you send it like out to literary agents. Like, you typically want to have a traditional publisher pick it up. Like, I don't think that you would right away go down the self-publishing route, right? So you would try out that route, and I think it's easier for us to, you should, you can't climb a mountain by just jumping on top of it, right? I mean, you have to take the course, and however long that takes. I mean, I have respect for people who have written a novel at 21 years old, but I'm not that person. So I think it's important to just, work at your own pace. This is very important.
Is your mom a novelist? Or I think she is, right?
Oh
From what you
yeah,
said?
yeah, she
Yeah.
is. She
Did
is.
she start with
Yeah,
short stories or from the beginning was she starting with novels?
she started with short stories. And she
Oh, I
told me
see.
that you should start with short stories, like practice the art of telling a story, and then you can go to novels, because you have to do justice to the novels. Because
That makes sense.
yeah, because just the last day when I was, I told you about the interview earlier, right? About me and my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So she was telling me something about, I don't think it made it to the interview, but yeah, no, it did make it to the interview, sorry, my bad. So she was talking about, like, I asked her, when you write, whether it's a short story or a longer story, whatever, whom are you writing it for? Like, are you writing it to impress the editor, or you're writing it to impress the, jury committee of an award or whatever? She's like, no, I'm writing it for the reader, and anybody can be a reader. Like, it can be an editor, it can be the common reader, it can be and just anyone. It can be a filmmaker, whoever it might be. So, and that's the thing. Like, you have to, at the end of the day, I think, like, while I am getting my start through literary magazines as well, obviously, like with short stories, you do that. That's the first way to go through it. But at the same time, I do think that oftentimes when I'm, looking at the submit page of a literary magazine, subconsciously or very consciously, I'm thinking that, okay, in order to get in here, I have to impress the editor, and that's all I'm thinking about. And as a writer, I think that until now, like, my mom actually got me into this thought process that you have to think about the readers at large, not just one person or a couple of people who might read. And to be very honest, the literary magazines do essentially circle around the literary community. It does not reach the readers, outside the community, so to speak. It generally does not. Like, if you have friends and all who are also readers but are not writers, they might read your work, but that's because they know you. Sometimes they're reading it because they know you, and that's not really like organic readers, if you will. So yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time. Like, just the way you improve as a writer, and um, I think it's all about the emotions a character or a set of characters can elicit out of a person. And the reason I'm saying this, I was thinking about it earlier, that last year, back in 2022, in the month of May, I had gone to the theaters to watch Top Gun Maverick, right? And so when Top Gun, the first one, came out, I wasn't even born, but I watched it on TV and I liked it. And I thought, okay, the way that movie ended, what are they going to do in the second part? And Tom Cruise is old, like, what are they going to do? So I think I went out of sheer curiosity, if not anything else. And while, yeah, sure, like, you can say that the plot had scientific flaws. Like, when, if anyone has seen the movie, if you have seen the movie, when Tom Cruise character, like, was going at a very high speed and he crashed, like, how did he survive that? He shouldn't have survived that. That's scientific inaccuracy. But and it was a very simple plot as well. But the characters were so relatable, they were so real, and I think that's the kind of stories that stay with us. And even when we watch a lot of commercial movies and well, and for the people who love franchise movies, let's say like Marvel movies or DC movies, we all know that some of these things are not real, some of these things will never happen, some of these things are like, okay, come on, like that was a plot flaw right there. But it's the characters that stay with us. I don't think Marvel Cinematic Universe would have been so huge if Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark did not stay with us. I don't think that would have happened, like, because superhero movies have been made before, but the way this franchise took off, it's because of the fact that we could relate to those characters as fellow human beings. And I think unless and until that is possible, and the way to really create real characters is if whether you are developed as a person. Because I think that unless and until you yourself are in a position where okay, fine, I don't agree with you, but I see your point of view. Okay, I don't, there's a difference of opinion, but I understand your perspective, I understand why you're angry, or it's okay, it's fine. Unless and until you have that flow within yourself and you are willing to understand the different people around you, I don't think you can create well-rounded characters. Not really. Because in a story, like maybe a short story will be based on one character, but even then, like even in a short story, you are dealing with at least two or three characters, right? Because unless and until the whole thing is completely internalized, the narrative, you are dealing with at least one or two more characters who are different from your main character. And in a novel, you are having, like, you have to create some well-rounded characters, and they better not be mirror images of each other, because otherwise, like, that doesn't happen in real life, right? Like, people are not the same. So yeah, I think our understanding of the human psychology helps a lot. Like you also mentioned this earlier, and characters are the most important thing. Like, you create memorable characters, people, people will forget the plot flaws for the moment, and they will stay with the characters, because that's what you want, right?
Mhm.
And even when we are watching these, on Netflix or whatever, like, these series, it's the characters that stay with us. We remember the characters, whether we are angry with the plot or whatever, the way the plot functions. It's not the plot driven stories that touch us, it's the character driven stories.
I agree, definitely, especially for literary fiction. But even as you said, for the
Even, yeah.
commercial stuff, like Marvel, especially, yeah. The
Mm.
plots are very complex, especially as the movies progress. There's so many of them, but then we don't really remember them. But we just think about the people we like Bucky or Steve
Mm.
Rogers, Spider-Man, and we just think about their traits that are really endearing and remind us of ourselves or people we know.
Exactly. And I think that's the part I want to, go for as a writer. And you also like, I think we always have to be evolving as people, to evolve as writers, and that's just given. Not just in writing, in writing, I think in any field, I think really, where
Mm-hmm.
you have to use your mind a lot, you have to use your head a lot. Like, you evolve, and you
Mm-hmm.
are a lot more gentle with yourself and others. And so yeah, I think who you are as a person will influence your writing a lot, because we essentially are like, even when your character, you even when I'm sorry, even when we are making a lot of different characters, we are the ones that are creating them, and we are the ones that are giving them shades and dialogues and redemption arcs or other character arcs, and whatever, we're giving them a story. We are essentially playing God when we are writing. So unless and until we understand different human beings and their maybe different cultures, the different way people live, I don't think that's really possible.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you so much for coming onto our podcast. This was a
Thank you
very
for having me.
enlightening discussion. And, I can't wait to have you back on if you want to come back on. We have so much more to
Definitely.
discuss. Yeah.
Definitely. I would love that. I love to talk.
I love talking with you. It was amazing.
This was amazing. Like, thank you for having me. And I can't wait for the podcast to go live.
You will later today. I am posting this, so you will be able to listen to
Mhm.
it very soon. Well, thank you so much again. And guys, listen to our next podcast, our next author interview next week. Thank you so much.